Hello, and thank you for joining us for Session Confessions. We're going to give it another minute or so and let some folks join, and then we'll kick right off. So just give it a couple minutes. Go ahead and get started. We're so excited that you're here with us today to talk about what's going on in the General Assembly. I'm Edith Bullard. I'm the Chief Communications Officer at the ACLU of Virginia, and I'm joined today by my Policy Director, Ashna Khanna. Before we jump into the specifics about the General Assembly bill and the bills we're opposing and the ones we're supporting, I just want to talk a little bit about Session Confessions, what it is, this session. You can join us right here on Facebook every other week on Fridays at noon for a recap of what's been going on in the General Assembly the previous couple of weeks. You'll meet different members of our staff. You'll hear about what bills have been introduced. You'll hear about what we're supporting, what we're opposing, and you'll have a chance to ask questions in real time. If we don't know the answers right away, we'll get back to you as soon as we possibly can. So we're excited to be able to connect with you this way. And we're excited that we'll be able to kind of keep you in the loop of what's going on at General Assembly. Just a reminder, if you got any questions, if you can put it in the comments section for your Facebook, and we'll get to that at the end of the session. But first, I'm going to open this up and introduce Ashna, have her join us, and have her first start by telling us a little bit about what's going on, what's the current atmosphere, what's the environment looking like for civil rights and civil liberties in Virginia right now.
Thank you so much, Edith. As a reminder to folks, my name is Ashna Khanna, and I am the Policy Director of the ACLU of Virginia. Quite honestly, we are approaching a very challenging 2023 legislative session as civil liberties have been under attack by our leaders since 2022. From keeping abortion legal to protecting trans kids from discrimination at school to urging lawmakers to see people who are incarcerated as more than their worst mistake, we've got our work cut out for us this session. But here's what we can tell you in the face of these attacks. We at the ACLU, alongside with all of our partners, will do whatever it takes for us to block bad bills that would roll back on the incredible progress that Virginia has made. And we will also be pushing for some great bills and initiatives this upcoming session. It's going to be a short one, only 45 days, but we will be relentlessly fighting for all Virginians to make our Commonwealth a place where everyone can belong and thrive.
Sasha, thanks for that overview of the political climate. Let's talk about our priorities this session. So what do we hope moves forward, and what are we going to be having to block?
Oh, that is a good question, Edith. I want to remind everyone that the legislative session is ever changing, and by the time it ends, that means our priorities and our goals may look different than they do right now. We'll be flexible. We're just going to have to adjust and switch over to whatever is needed and comes out of the General Assembly. I'll also add in that this week, we've been analyzing and taking a scan of the landscape, what are all the bills that have been submitted, and really looking alongside with our partners of where we think our impact will be greatest. As of now, several priorities are taking lead as we head into session. The first will be to protect and expand reproductive freedom as much as possible. We know that Virginia's leaders seek to severely restrict a person's ability to make their own reproductive choices. And just this week, Delegate Byron and a couple of others have introduced a 15-week abortion ban. At least 6 abortion bans have been introduced so far, including a full ban by Senator Newman the same senator who introduced the 15-week ban. And so this is telling us, this is telling partners, this is telling Virginians that anti-abortion legislators really have an agenda to block and ban abortion in Virginia. And we're really deeply concerned about it. Abortion bans are never acceptable, even when politicians try to make you think that they are, because no pregnancies are exactly alike. There can be no one-fits-all way solution of approaching them. That is why it's best to not make any stringent laws about who can access abortion and instead leave the decision in the hands of the people best equipped to make it, the people who can get pregnant and their medical providers. I will also just add that this is an attack on a lot of times low income and people of color and women of color who, are struggling to get access to healthcare resources. And so really what this is not just a banning abortion, but it is making, really unhealthy atmosphere for people to get the help and the medical attention that they need.
Well, this is just wild that there's so many bans out there. I mean, Virginians have been making their own reproductive health decisions for over 50 years. So it seems like government overreach to me.
I mean, for real, honestly, that's exactly what it is. It's trying to insert the opinions and beliefs of politicians into the private medical decisions of Virginians. It's unacceptable, and we're going to fight it like hell to ensure that every person who can become pregnant in Virginia gets to determine their own futures and becomes a parent or not on their own terms.
Let's look at another priority, one that is equally concerning, and that's defending another community that's under attack in our Commonwealth, the LGBTQ plus community, especially young people, it seems. Yeah. Have we seen any bad bills?
Oh, we've seen a ton. So correct. So this is another one of our priorities, is to uphold and expand protections for the LGBTQ plus community and block any bills that seek to harm this community. And so we've seen a stark increase in the number of anti-trans legislation this year. Just to put it into perspective, so far, 5 trans sports ban bills have been introduced and vary in scope. For example, Senate Bill 692 by Senator Peake only applies to public and private elementary and secondary schools, but Senate Bill 911 by Senator Cosgrove also applies to colleges and universities, which will impact trans adults. So in addition, there are 3 gender-affirming care bans that have been introduced so far. An example is Senator Peake's Senate Bill 960 seeks to ban gender-affirming care for kids and deny parents the right to make medical decisions for their children. In fact, bad bills that impact LGBTQ and non-binary kids are now in the double digits. Bottom line is that politicians need to stop using trans and non-binary kids as political pawns and leave the LGBTQ plus community in peace. It's ridiculous the amount of bills and how they have increasingly came up this upcoming session.
Yeah, I mean, and it seems to keep coming every day. There seems to be new bills introduced, and one is just as bad as the next one. So it's been awful. And that's all the things we're going to need to block. But what are we doing? Are we just doing defensive stuff, or what are we doing offensively?
No, alongside our partners, not at all. We've got several opportunities to not only defend, but actually expand LGBTQ plus rights in Virginia this year. One example is removing the outdated ban on same-sex marriage in our state constitution. Virginia is for all lovers, and removing the stain from the Virginia Constitution is long overdue. I will say also that we're working alongside with partners. It's a very complicated, just to put into perspective, political atmosphere. We've got, a Republican governor who has made it clear of his priorities, one of them being the abortion bans. And then we've got a Democratic Senate and a Republican majority House. And it's an election year this fall. So there's a lot of topics on the issue. And so I, want to also mention that there are proactive initiatives that we're moving forward, but also we're on the defensive a lot.
Right. Yeah, it's going to be a tough one, but I know that you and your team are going to be out there and doing everything that you can in order to block these bills. Our kids deserve to be recognized and to be, upheld for kind of who they are and being their authentic self. So I know that we've got one more priority that we're really focused on. Let's talk a little bit about that one.
Yeah, so we're hoping to make some waves in the criminal legal reform space, which will be difficult, with our current administration's tough on crime positions. But we're really excited about common sense reforms like second look legislation, which would allow someone who has worked hard to rehabilitate themselves to petition the court for an amended sentence. That's something that folks on both sides of the aisle have agreed on. We passed it out of the Senate this last 2022 legislative session with, again, support both sides of the aisle. And so we're really urging legislators to give Virginians who have done hard work to rehabilitate during their incarceration a second chance by passing Senate Bill 842 and a second chance to come home, come back to their communities and be the wonderful community members that we know folks can be. We also have a real opportunity to eliminate the prohibitive costs and fees that loved ones face, incarcerated people, and they have to pay when they want to stay in touch with their loved ones, and provide needed products for their loved ones. And so Virginia's prisons and jails charge ridiculous fees for things like phone calls, emails, commissionary items, and the burdens of these costs hit the loved ones of the people incarcerated the hardest, while prisons and jails make a profit. So lawmakers from across the aisle agree that this is wrong. This is taking advantage of vulnerable communities in Virginia, especially when prison officials are being rewarded for choosing certain service providers over others, even if it's not in the best service for the care for the people in their care. And this is something that we're really passionate about. It should not cost ridiculous numbers to get in touch with a loved one who's currently incarcerated. We know that this also helps have families stay together, and recidivism rate ends up being lower as well.
That's great. And it's good to hear that we're proactively working to send people home and address Virginia's mass incarceration crisis. And you're absolutely right about the profiteering one. I mean, I talked to a person who talked about a family member who talked about spending tens of thousands of dollars just to keep in touch with their loved ones. And these are often people who can't afford it to leave.
Yeah.
And so an awful thing, and we really need to address that. Are there barriers that we're facing when reforming Virginia's criminal legal system this session?
Sadly, yes. We're seeing quite a few attempts to roll back incredible progress that's recently been made in the criminal legal reform space this session. We've seen bills proposed that would bring back pretextual stops, which would allow the police to stop people for minor traffic violations as a guise to investigate a more serious charge. We have also seen a bill that would allow police to stop motorists if a police detects the smell of marijuana in the car. We've also had several bills on our radar that would expand police in schools, which we know contributes to the school to prison pipeline, negatively impacts students of color and students with disabilities. That is just like the top of the iceberg. I will say that we were going through our bill scan this morning, and there are hundreds of bills that are rollbacks of even the earned sentence credits and some of the other reforms that partners on the ground have really tried hard to pass. So it's really I think what it is, it's disappointing to see the message that we're seeing from lawmakers and attacking the values that I would hold true for Virginians in the community that we have. And so it's just really sad to see all these different bills that have been really submitted, increasing charges. It varies so much. And we know a lot of times these bills directly impact Black and Brown communities, especially when it comes to policing. So to see policing reforms going backwards, that's a huge no in our book, and just ridiculous to see that these kinds of bills are still being proposed.
So why are lawmakers introducing these bills?
That's a great question, Edith. So I wish I could, read people's minds and change them, right? We are using common sense, logical, values and talking points, and it seems like our current administration likes to use fear-mongering tactics to convince Virginians things aren't okay in the Commonwealth. But in reality, locking people up doesn't keep anyone safer. And according to the poll by Data for Progress, voters feel just as safe or more safe after Virginia passed criminal legal reforms in 2020, like decriminalizing simple possession of marijuana and ending pretextual policing. I'd also like to point out, we're not the first state to pass these bills. These are bills that have been passed in other states for years now. So we're asking Virginia to catch up, to do what's right for their community, and stay there. And so it's really, I think the sense of fear mongering has really been used by both lawmakers and this administration to really make folks believe that Virginia is something else than it currently is.
Well, that's very sad, and it's very, disheartening to think about some of the progress that we've made that is all being, questioned at this point. But like you said when we began, we're not giving up, and we're going to fight and try our best to make sure that we don't lose ground, because Virginia has been making so much great progress. I want to go back a little bit and think about the abortion bans that are out there. And, there are a lot of conversation about the 15-week ban, and that's a reasonable compromise. Can you talk a little bit about, you talked a little bit about it when you talked earlier, but can you just kind of clearly share with the audience, why is any ban not a reasonable compromise?
Yeah, so, this one actually surprises me because the polling numbers say that Virginians think some types of bans would be okay. I want to emphasize, so abortion bans are never acceptable. And so, again, there's not a one fit all solution. No two pregnancies are alike. And so it is really important that here in Virginia, that we leave these decisions to the people that are best equipped to make it. Those are the people who can get pregnant and their medical providers. Anything outside of that is ultimately what it does is it's going to just provide more restrictions, and also it's going to provide a slippery slope. So what sometimes people don't understand as well is that when you pass any sort of ban, one, you're putting a arbitrary number out into the public, out into policy, that are going to impact women and people who are pregnant, and are going to impact a doctor's ability and a provider's ability from doing what they are, educated and meant to do. And so we would not like to see that. And then also you're going to allow, legislators and the public to then make it a slippery slope. So when you're not just talking about bans, you're talking about access to reproductive health care. And so I think a lot of times people forget that those two things are directly connected. And so from a value standpoint, we want all people to be able to access reproductive health care. And we think that's a right, and it should be a right in Virginia. We're also proactively working with our partners to make sure that this is something that we embed in our constitutional amendment. So I think that, again, I would like to emphasize that bans are never acceptable, and it would be really severe progress back, especially in the Commonwealth of Virginia.
So a follow on to that, there are people who believe, and we've seen it in the press the last few days, that, with the victory of Aaron Rouse in Virginia Beach, the right to abortion is safe in Virginia. Is that true? And, what should we keep in mind there?
Yeah, so I would say that the right to abortion is never just safe in Virginia, right? When you've got so many abortion bans being introduced by legislators, that means that, there are legislators and maybe, their constituents or people who have been elected into office that are now introducing these abortion bans. So I would say, regardless, I'm very happy to hear when policymakers come out against abortion bans and align with us on a policy initiative. But I don't think any one individual or any one election is going to make abortion safe. What we need to do, and what's really important, is that in the elections this fall and in legislative session, is that us as constituents, us as community members, need to let our legislators know that abortion bans are unacceptable. And so I would, I wouldn't sigh with relief that that's completely off the table, because this administration and there are legislators as well that think differently and believe differently. And so for me, I believe our work is still cut out for us, just as it was before.
So Ashna, we have a comment. Oh, I gotta find it, hold on. We have a comment, and it's an area that we don't spend a lot of time in, but I thought that maybe you might want to talk a little bit about reentry and reentry services the comment from Facebook, and we just want to acknowledge it there more than to say that it is a priority that we're working on, is that Virginia needs to help and produce housing opportunities for released sex offenders. And we know that there are a multitude of reentry problems for all people who are incarcerated that come out. But I do think that in this group of people that there are other things like HUD housing not being available or Section 8 vouchers not being available. And so, again, I'm just lifting up the comment from the viewer, because I think it is important that people are aware of it, and knowing that, this increased difficulty into reentry certainly does make reoffending more, potentially more likely. Because employment and housing is really so important to anybody who coming out of the system.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And we'll also mention that, not only is it important, but there are some bills that, we've even flagged as of this morning that have been introduced. And so, Senate Bill 846 by Senator Favola, which has a House version too, would allow people with previous convictions to become peer recovery specialists. And we know that some of our partners, that we've worked with in SIP and on the second look legislation, who did come out, were able to, access these jobs, and just making sure that everyone can. So I think there's this is definitely, it's not just about getting people out, Edith. I completely agree. And I would like to agree with the Facebook comment. It's about keeping people out and getting them access to resources, and not making it harder. The amount of times that, again, access to housing, access to employment, these are needs that individuals have. And it's something that we're taking a look at, and we're trying our best and working with partners who have been doing this work much longer than us, that have been providing reentry services, and have been on the ground doing that directly with people when they get out. And so we're looking to those partners as well to help us understand what to lift up and what to push forward. And so it's definitely something that is on our minds and hearts as we think about the criminal legal system.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. We got a question that, it says, I noticed there are a lot more anti-trans legislation this session compared to only 2 from the past session. Why is that? What's the message being sent? And what can we do to challenge these attacks on trans people?
Yeah. Why is that? Unfortunately, I feel like both something that we've been facing at the local level is that this has become a conversation that is beyond just students. And so I think we're seeing an incredible increase on attacks, probably for a couple of reasons. One, that it's elections this fall, and legislators are trying to make certain stances clear that they believe that the communities they represent believe. And that's really unfortunate, is that we're seeing, an increased hate and increased hatred. And honestly, I just want to call it out for what it is, right? We're seeing racist and transphobic and all of the isms come out, and it's incredibly disheartening to see that this is what some people in the Commonwealth believe. However, we think these are few voices that have been loud and that have had a platform. And so what we're noticing is that there's been more anti-trans legislation this session. I think more people are coming out with, really disgusting pieces of legislation that would be a rollback for our communities. And what we can do to challenge this is continue to let those folks know, and for communities to continue to stand up. And we've worked with students to continue to stand up and say, this is not the way that our schools should be. This is not the way that our community should be. This should not be the way that we school board should be. And so I think it starts at the local level and goes up all the way to the state level. And so we're hopeful that, as we continue to advocate, that these types of policies and issues are really ones that, are, really that we as a community are standing up and saying, these are not what we want. This is not true, and not giving a voice to that. So it's disheartening to see, but we have seen an increase, and we're working tirelessly with partners to also combat these bills.
I think that's really important. And I think I love that you called out, like you said, let's call it what it is. Let's call it hate. And that's kind of what we're seeing, whether it's in the abortion space or the LGBTQ space or in the criminal legal reform space. And we do have to let people know that this isn't what Virginians want either. You know, and I think that's just so very important. And to that point, what are some ways that people can get involved? What should folks be doing? I understand that there might be a little bit of an in-person action that people can take this week, especially as it relates to the second look legislation.
Yeah, there's a lot that folks can do, but yes, something that we at the ACLU are very excited about is our new organizer, Jamshid. He has been working with Sisters in Prison, No Left Turns, and the Humanization Project and FAM for a lobby day next Tuesday to urge lawmakers to pass second look. Again, this will be on Tuesday, January 17th. We'll be having folks who are formerly incarcerated, loved ones of incarcerated people, people harmed by crime, and more at this event. And we'd love to have you with us, ask legislators to give folks who have been rehabilitated a second chance. We'll drop the RSVP link in the chat if you want to check it out. It's going to be an exciting event. There's going to be food provided. There's going to be a chance to get in touch with your legislators. I know sometimes it can seem deeming, and so lobby days are a great way to connect both the community and legislators, and also just make legislators aware when they're like, who is this like group of folks up here that are so passionate? They don't get to hear a lot of times from community members. And so let them know what second look looks to, why it's important to you and your loved ones and your community, and come join us. It's going to be great. I'm really, really excited about this.
So we hope folks will kind of, pick up the link and join us there. And if in any way that you're like, oh my gosh, I've never lobbied before, I can't do this, know that one, there's a training session the Sunday before, and two, there are going to be some great folks with ACLU and our partners who will be there to just kind of walk you through that session. So it should not be, difficult or scary at all, because you'll have all the support of a lot of folks that have been working in this space for a long time. And second look is like so incredibly important that we hope that you will come and join us. What other ways that can people get involved, Ashna?
Yeah, I'm glad that you asked, because we need a lot of people to show up for these issues this legislative session. I know we say show up at the polls. It's just as important to show up in legislative session and let your lawmakers know this is how you feel now about certain issues. So first of all, stay in touch with us. Our social media is the best place to get up-to-date information on bills you care about. So be sure to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram if you haven't already. Next, look out for our action alerts. These action alerts allow you to submit pre-filled messages to your representative in the General Assembly all the way up to the governor. We'll have action alerts for the 15-week ban and second look legislation ready for you to fill out as of next week. So keep checking in while we work to move those along. But also you can contact your legislator now. And so if you're fired up, there's no time like the present to make your voice heard. I will let you know that a lot of people actually don't call their lawmakers. If you go on LIS and you find your legislator, you just give them a call and you say, I really believe that my legislator should be voting this way or that way for a specific bill. So I don't believe my legislator should pass any abortion ban legislation. They actually tally the number of people who call because they're not too many. And so really, again, I want to say, I know it feels daunting. We'll walk you through the process, but really your voice matters. And finally, show up. You'll hear about the rallies and the protests that we're participating in. Join us there. Have a compelling story of your own about one of the issues. Share it with us or share it with your lawmaker by testifying on a bill or calling and emailing them. Share a post on social media and spread the word. None of us are powerless, especially if we all work together. When we speak, our lawmakers listen. And so, we need a lot of us to speak, because I think lawmakers have made it quite apparent that there are certain bills and certain hatred that is coming into the Legislative Assembly this session that we would like to make known is not welcomed here in Virginia.
Thanks, Asha. That's great. And yes, I think it's really, really important that we all get involved, for us to do our work, for our partners to do their work, it's important that we have the community and folks, like the folks that are on this session confession, have their voices be heard. I do wanted to lift up a comment. We got a comment on Facebook that says, I find solace in the fact that it seems to be just a couple of bad eggs making these anti-trans and hate, as opposed to spreading across many different legislators. And that's great. I think that, if we can keep it to a few, that's great. I got to say that I think there's more than I'd like to hear it come from. I'd like to have a few, even fewer than that, if it were up to me.
I agree, Edith.
So, thanks for joining us today. Anything else you want to share?
No, I was just going to say, I agree, Edith, and it just takes one bad egg to rot some of the others. And so I just want to remind folks too that I'm happy that we're in this movement at this time with you all, that, we're going to show up with our partners, with our community members, with the subject matter experts, with the most impacted communities, and do our best to, really advocate against the bad bills and try to pass some good ones.
Sounds good. Sounds good. So I'd like to thank you for being here, Ashna. I'd like to thank all the folks who joined us here today. It shows what can happen in the Commonwealth if we all come together. Don't forget, Lobby Day, second look, January 17th. Go, sign up for that, or visit acluva.org to look for our action alerts, or follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all those folks. And we hope that you'll join us on January the 27th for our second edition of Session Confessions, and we'll see what has unraveled by then. Yeah. Ashna.
Can I add one more thing, just to add another opportunity for folks to come out and support? So one of our wonderful partners, Equality Virginia, who has been doing a lot of great work, are going to be having lobby days every Monday starting on January 16th. So that is another way, another opportunity that we let folks know, especially to advocate against the anti-LGBTQ and transphobic legislation that has been introduced. So that's another opportunity for you to get involved.
Sounds great. So there's a lot of things we can do besides just sitting and moaning about how bad things are. So let's get in there and get involved and be part of the fight. I think that's really, really important. Again, thank you all for joining. Join us on January the 27th at noon. And we look forward to working together and continuing the struggle. Thanks, Ashna, and thanks to your team, who I know this is a really busy time for them, and they're putting in a lot of effort and a lot of time up there in the Capitol. So thanks so much for everything you guys are doing.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Edith. It wouldn't be possible without you all or the community members who have been fighting these fights a lot longer than us.
Great.